So, Quintin Collins here. I'm the author of The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, which is forthcoming from Cherry Castle Publishing in 2021. And I want to just stop and talk about what I feel it means to be an artist. I was listening to some Kendrick Lamar, one of the greatest rappers of all time, and one of the things I've really appreciated about his music throughout all of his albums and projects is you can really tell that he has a sense of intent in the music that he's putting together. And one of the things that we learn in writing in terms of using all the techniques we have for craft is what are the ways that you can be purposeful about what you're writing? Because a lot of us know things like, similes, metaphors, and we know the word syntax exists, but what matters the most is not just that we know these things and that we put them into place, but that we're purposeful. We have some intent with it. So when I'm thinking about like what makes me really consider myself an artist and how that separates me from other people who enjoy writing but don't consider themselves writers is I think it's that intent piece, that purpose. What are the ways that you're sitting down before you even get started on the project that you're gonna sit down and write, and think about what purpose you want to apply to what you're writing. And I think that that intent piece is something that you really can learn on top of just having an innate ability for it. Of course, when we think about people who are very good at a piece of art, we often talk about talent. I think that talent's a good piece of it. I think that there are people out there who just naturally have a lot of talent, and they can look at an art and they can study it themselves for a while and they'll just have a natural propensity for it. But I think the piece where learning really comes into it is where we come to understand intent. And of course that can be whether you have somebody who's showing you how something works in a workshop, or a class, or that can even be if you're reading a book and you're starting to track how the artist, the writer there is using the different craft techniques. That piece of intent is where you start to see that not only is someone doing something, but you can understand why. And it's that sense of joy and fulfillment you get when you can see the pieces kind of coming together for it. So I think one of the biggest things I can tell anyone who's out there thinking like what does it take to really get into writing? What is the thing that I'm going to learn? You're going to learn a lot of techniques. You're going to learn a lot of jargon and words, but the biggest thing that you should really seek to understand as you're getting out there is how do I as an artist stop and think this is the place where I really want what I'm putting together to come together. This is the thing that I'm working toward, and how with every single word that I'm using, every sentence, how am I working toward that goal? How am I building that intent into every line of the poem that I'm working on? And that's the thing that keeps us up at night. That's what haunts us. That's when we're sitting down and doing our revisions, we're like, man, I've been at this for like an hour and I'm still stuck on just the same word. That's what's really getting us right there. It's the intent. It's that space where we really want every bit of what we're working on to be exactly toward that goal or that idea that initially, that spark that was within us that said like, I can't be silent about an issue. And this is not to say that that's true for everybody, but I think that for me, that's what really emboldens me to say that yes, at this point of my writing life, where I've been doing this for years now, that I can say I really feel like an artist. It's because of the fact that intent is something that isn't just a facet of writing that I have to think about, but it's innate. It's the thing that when I begin any piece of work, I stop and I start there first rather than thinking about intent in the background. And it's one of the greatest joys that I would say I have about doing what I do is that I feel like I've reached that point. And for me, it was definitely a bit of education and some insight to understand what that really meant. But it's what I try to do in every piece of poetry that I put together. And I think that if you're looking for some ways that you can really kind of come to understand intent in your own work is always stop and ask yourself why. If you're doing anything in a repeated way, say if you have a word that's coming back, or a syntax that you're using, a sentence structure, or even if there's a certain motif around color or other kinds of images, just make sure you stop and ask yourself why. That question of why is what's really going to help you understand if you are working toward a certain purpose. Because maybe you're going to write something and in revision you decide that a technique that you were trying out doesn't really have a place in what you're putting together because the intent isn't there towards whatever thematic or other goal you're working toward in your work. So whenever you get ready to sit down, you get started on your next piece of writing, just think, what's my goal? What am I working toward? Maybe take a sticky note and stick it at the top of your laptop so you can think like, this is the mantra for the work that I'm going for. And then you can, really hit at that intent. And, maybe you don't get it on your first draft. Maybe you get it in your second, your third, or your 50th. But, as long as you have that thing that's there driving your purpose, you'll know. And maybe, just maybe, you might even discover that the intent of your poem is something very different than what you started with. Whatever the case that may be, just make sure that somewhere out there you're thinking that you want to be purposeful about your words. Thank you for listening, and don't forget, like and subscribe so that you can catch up on the newest updates as the book is coming to fruition. Again, it'll be here in 2021. Thank you for listening.